All right, everyone, get ready, because today we're going deep on a topic that's, well, kind of crucial. Nuclear proliferation.
Yeah, no kidding.
This is especially important for all you UPSC aspirants out there, gearing up for that international relations paper.
Definitely a big one.
But honestly, the implications of nuclear weapons, well, they kind of reach all of us.
Absolutely.
We're talking about a force that could reshape the world as we know it. So whether you're hitting the books for exams or just trying to wrap your head around global affairs, you're in the right spot.
Couldn't agree more. It's a topic that demands attention.
Exactly. And for this deep dive, we're going to be working with excerpts from a text that, well, it really digs into the nuts and bolts of nuclear proliferation. But first, picture this. There are enough nuclear warheads out there to wipe out civilization multiple times over.
It's a chilling thought.
It is. And it begs the question, does having all this power actually deter conflict? Or does it make the unthinkable, well, more likely?
That's the core dilemma. And to even begin to understand it, you have to grasp what makes these weapons so unique.
Right. We need to go beyond just calling them destructive and really explore what sets nuclear weapons apart.
For sure.
Well, the text takes us straight to a defining moment.
Right.
Hiroshima and Nagasaki, August 1945. Talk about a visceral illustration of the sheer destructive power we're dealing with.
Absolutely. Hiroshima and Nagasaki forced the world to confront a whole new reality.
They did. And for our UPSC folks, this historical context is, well, it's essential. But even beyond exams, just understanding the sheer scale of destruction from those bombs.
It's fundamental to comprehending what's at stake with nuclear proliferation.
Okay, so to get even deeper into it, we need to distinguish between the two main types of nuclear weaponry.
Well, you've got atomic bombs, which use fission, the splitting of atoms. And then there's the hydrogen bomb, which is based on fusion, merging atoms.
Okay, so both unleash unbelievable devastation.
A hydrogen bomb, that represents a whole other level of destructive power, truly frightening.
And then the text brings up a term that's become, well, almost synonymous with this level of threat, weapons of mass destruction, or WOMDs.
Right, and nuclear weapons are like the archetype. The term itself, it speaks to the massive collateral damage and, all this ethical questions they raise.
Definitely. And it underscores that we're not talking about limited warfare here. It's the potential for widespread devastation, extending way beyond any intended target.
Precisely.
Now, while there are debates about whether all WMDs are truly equal, factoring in things like scale and practicality, there's no doubt that nuclear weapons occupy a category all their own when it comes to, well, just sheer destructive capability.
Agreed.
Okay, so with those first bombs, the world entered what some call the first nuclear age, dominated by the Cold War. The U.S. and the USSR, they engaged in what we call vertical proliferation, just building up their nuclear arsenals relentlessly.
Right, like a constant buildup.
Exactly. And this period is it's a gold mine for you UPSC aspirants because it really illustrates some core international relations concepts in action, like the security dilemma.
Right, the security dilemma. So that basically boils down to one state's efforts to enhance its security, but it often inadvertently makes other states feel less secure.
And then that can lead to
a spiral of mistrust and escalation. The Cold War, that was a textbook example of this. Each superpower just accumulating more and more nuclear weapons in response to the perceived threat from the other.
So basically a high-stakes game of keeping up with the Joneses.
Exactly. Except the fate of the world was hanging in the balance.
And beyond the security concerns, there's also that element of prestige.
Oh, definitely. Having nuclear weapons became a symbol of, global power, especially for those permanent members of the UN Security Council.
Right. It's like being part of this exclusive nuclear club.
Exactly. It offered not just military might, but also political influence on the world stage.
Now, the text also mentions the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, or NPT for short, from 1968.
Right, the NPT.
This agreement was meant to limit the spread of nuclear weapons, but, well, it wasn't a perfect solution.
No agreement is.
Even the NPT had exceptions, with countries like India, Pakistan, and Israel choosing to remain outside its framework.
It just highlights that controlling this technology, well, it's not as easy as just creating a treaty.
It's complex. The NPT is a crucial step in non-proliferation efforts, but it's important to acknowledge its limitations.
Absolutely. It reflects the reality of global politics, where national interests and security concerns, power dynamics, they often clash.
It's messy.
So we have this buildup of unimaginable destructive power during the Cold War. And it's a period defined by this constant threat of annihilation. Which brings us to a term that's as chilling as it is significant. Mutually assured destruction, or MAD.
Mad.
Yeah.
Right, it
Yeah.
became the grim logic behind Cold War strategy.
Yeah, it's the idea that if one nuclear power launched a first strike against another, well, both sides would ultimately be destroyed. Yeah, complete annihilation.
That's like a twisted game of chicken, except the stakes are the survival of civilization.
It's a terrifying thought, but
And this second strike capability, the ability to retaliate even after suffering a nuclear attack, it transformed warfare. But did this balance of terror actually keep the peace during the Cold War?
that's a good question.
Was it a stabilizing force, or did it simply heighten the risk of, catastrophic conflict?
That's where things get really interesting, and it's something UPSC aspirants should be prepared to really grapple with.
Because there are contrasting viewpoints on this, right?
Oh, absolutely. You have realist thinkers. They often argue that Maradi actually created a certain level of stability. The fear of total annihilation, no matter how horrifying, acted as this powerful check against large-scale conflict.
Right, so fear is a deterrent.
But then you have the liberal perspective, which says the very existence of these weapons inherently increased risk and insecurity. They argue you can't ignore the potential for miscalculation, for accidents, for escalation. It's just too great.
So basically, two very different interpretations of the same terrifying reality. And this debate doesn't end with the Cold War, does it?
No, not at all. In fact, you could argue that the challenges of controlling nuclear proliferation have become even more complex in the post-Cold War world.
The dynamics have shifted,
Yeah, and the players have multiplied.
which makes understanding this post-Cold War landscape even more important, right?
Yeah.
Especially for those of you prepping for the UPSC.
Absolutely crucial. It really has. The Cold War, it provides us like a crucial backdrop, but the landscape of nuclear proliferation, it's significantly evolved. We're not in that bipolar world anymore, dominated by just two superpowers.
Things have changed.
The nuclear club has expanded, and with that comes a whole new set of challenges.
For sure. We're seeing countries like North Korea, Iran, actively pursuing nuclear capabilities, defying all that international pressure, sanctions.
It's a concerning trend.
And then there's the terrifying possibility of, non-state actors, terrorist organizations, getting their hands on these weapons.
Yeah.
That scenario, it could completely destabilize global security.
That's a very real concern. And the reasons why non-proliferation is so difficult, well, they're multifaceted. We can circle back to that security dilemma here. Countries feel insecure, so they seek security in the most powerful weapons out there.
It's a chilling logic, but
But it's a powerful motivator for states that see themselves as vulnerable.
it's like it creates a self-fulfilling prophecy, doesn't it?
Kind of, yeah.
One country's pursuit of nuclear weapons fuels insecurity in its neighbors, leading them to seek their own nuclear deterrence. And it just keeps going.
It's a vicious cycle, very hard to break. And then there's the prestige factor we talked about earlier. Nuclear weapons, unfortunately, they're still seen as like a status symbol.
Yeah.
Power, influence on the global stage. Some regimes see them as a way to elevate their status, project strength.
So how do we counter this? What are the measures being taken? The text mentions a bunch of strategies, from diplomacy to sanctions, even military intervention as like a last resort.
Right. The international community, they use a whole toolbox to try and curb this. Diplomatic efforts are huge, with countries working together to try to persuade others to not develop these weapons. Then you've got economic sanctions, which can be slapped on states that violate international agreements, or if they're engaging in any activities related to nuclear weapons development.
Sanctions can really hit hard, can't they?
They can. The aim is to basically cripple a country's economy.
Yeah.
Make the cost of pursuing nuclear weapons way too high.
Make it just not worth it.
Exactly. But we've seen that even really harsh economic sanctions, sometimes they're not enough to change a regime's mind if they're really set on it. And then, of course, there's the military option, intervention, I mean.
Yeah.
But that's a last resort, obviously. It has potentially terrible consequences.
It's a risky move.
For sure. Using force, it carries huge risks in terms of human life, and geopolitical instability.
And the text also points out a growing focus on disarmament these days. The logic, it seems pretty straightforward. Fewer nuclear weapons means a lower risk of them falling into the wrong hands, whether that's a rogue state or, a terrorist group.
Yeah. Disarmament is increasingly seen as key to non-proliferation efforts. The idea is if we can reduce the total number of these weapons out there, we reduce the danger. It's not an easy process, though.
No.
It's full of political and logistical challenges. but a lot of experts think it's absolutely essential for long-term global security.
Okay, so this brings us to a question that's, well, it's as much philosophical as it is practical.
Yeah.
Can we achieve a world without nuclear weapons? And if we can, do we even want that?
That's the big question, isn't it?
It is.
The text goes into this debate, lays out the arguments for and against complete nuclear disarmament. It really gets at the heart of some fundamental questions about power, security, the role of deterrence in international relations.
Conflicts. I mean, on the one hand, getting rid of weapons that can cause such incredible destruction, well, that seems like the obvious choice, doesn't it?
Right, it feels like it should be a good thing.
Like inherently good.
Yeah, that's a natural instinct. But what if these weapons existing and the fear they create, what if that's actually prevented some conflicts from escalating? What if the threat of mutually assured destruction, as crazy as it sounds, what if it's actually saved lives by making large-scale war unthinkable?
That's kind of a scary thought. But I see your point. It makes you think about the potential downsides of disarmament. What would happen if we got rid of these weapons and created a power vacuum?
Right.
Would that lead to other conflicts? Maybe even worse in the long run. And what about countries with, ambitions to expand their territory or influence? Would they feel emboldened if they knew that nuclear retaliation was off the table?
Exactly. It pushes us to think beyond simple solutions, to really grapple with how complex international relations are. A world without nuclear weapons, it sounds ideal. But would it really be safer? Or would it just change the kind of conflict we see, maybe create new ways for things to become unstable? There are no easy answers to these questions.
No.
But they're the questions we have to be asking.
They are. It's a reminder that when it comes to global security, simple answers are pretty rare.
Yeah.
This deep dive has definitely given me, and hopefully everyone listening, a lot to think about. And for those of you studying for the UPSC, this kind of critical thinking, this willingness to challenge your assumptions and really wrestle with these complicated scenarios, that's what's going to set you apart.
That's right. The UPSC International Relations paper, it's not about memorizing facts. It's about showing you understand these complex issues on a deep level. It's about analyzing different points of view, weighing the potential consequences, and making thoughtful, well-reasoned arguments about these topics that have the potential to really change the world.
So we've spent this episode really unpacking the complexities of nuclear proliferation, a topic that's, well, it can feel kind of overwhelming, to be honest. But before we wrap up, our expert has a final thought to really make you think, especially for those of you prepping for the UPSC and those intense discussions about international security.
Yeah, so the text we've been discussing, it focuses on this question. Can we have a world without nuclear weapons? And if so, should we even want that? But what if we kind of flip that around? What if instead of asking if we can get rid of these weapons, we ask ourselves if we should? Is a world without nuclear weapons actually a better world? It's a question that really challenges our assumptions, makes us think outside the box.
Yeah, it's a different way of looking at it. On the surface, getting rid of weapons that could cause such massive destruction just seems like the obvious thing to do.
Right, like it's got to be a good thing.
Yeah, like inherently good.
Exactly. But think about this. What if those weapons existing and the fear that comes with them, what if that's what's kept some conflicts from escalating? What if, that threat of mutually assured destruction, scary as it is, what if that's actually saved lives by making large-scale war unthinkable?
That's a chilling thought, but I see what you mean. It makes you consider like the unintended consequences of disarmament. If we got rid of nuclear weapons, would that create a power vacuum? And would that then lead to other types of conflict, maybe even more devastating in the long run?
Right, exactly.
And what about, countries that might be looking to expand their territory, their influence? Would they be more likely to take risks, if they knew that nuclear retaliation wasn't a possibility?
Exactly. It forces us to think beyond just simple solutions, to really understand how complicated international relations really are. A world without nuclear weapons, sure, it might sound perfect, but would it be safer? Or would it just, change how conflicts play out? Maybe create new ways for things to get unstable? These are tough questions.
They are.
And there's no easy answers, but they're the questions we need to be asking.
They are. It's a good reminder that, when it comes to global security, well, simple answers are kind of hard to come by.
Yeah.
This deep dive has definitely given me, and hopefully everyone listening, a lot to think about. And for those of you getting ready for the UPSC, This kind of thinking, being able to challenge what you think you know and really grapple with these complicated situations, that's what's going to help you stand out.
That's right. The UPSC International Relations paper, it's not about, just spitting back facts. It's about showing that you really get these complicated global issues. Being able to look at things from different angles, think about the consequences, make strong, well thought out arguments about topics that could really shape our future.
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
whether you're a UPSC aspirant aiming for top marks or just someone who's curious about the world and the forces that shape it, remember, keep asking questions, keep exploring, keep learning.
And if you found this deep dive insightful, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share it with your friends. We'll be back soon with another deep dive into a critical global issue. Until then, stay curious and keep those minds engaged.